My name is Jan Sarek again, and I'm the founder and former, now retired, executive director and CEO of Wisconsin Facets. I'm also currently the director of Sarek Consulting Services, where I work with nonprofit agencies to provide training for boards of directors and others like you all today. And I also do interim agency management and other services. I'm also the parent of 2 adult sons, one of whom has autism, which is how I got into all of this good stuff to begin with. So without further ado, here's today's agenda. We're going to do a quick overview of the Serving on Groups guidebook resource. I apologize to those of you who have been on for the first 2 webinars, but in case we're picking up somebody new, I want to make sure that they know about the guidebook. There's 8 sections in the Serving on Groups guidebook. Today we're going to do section 4, tools that group use, and section 5, tips and strategies for groups. And finally, we're going to end with some additional resources. Just a reminder that your handouts today include the PowerPoint slides, and then also the complete section 4 and 5 from the guidebook. And then there's a couple more handouts too. I'm going to do just a quick poll. If you guys could please answer this question, which is basically trying to get a handle on the experience that any of you have already with serving on groups. So either you've never served on one, or you've served on one before, or you're thinking about serving on one. And if you're serving on one now, if you could write it in the chat box, I'll read it out for you, for people. Okay, I'll wait a couple more people. Vote. All right, I'm going to close this up and share it out with you. All right, so it looks like, 100% of you have served on one before, and currently it doesn't look like anybody's serving on one right now, so I'll hide that. And then we will just go on to the next slide. So first of all, for those of you who weren't with us for the other previous webinars, I just want to briefly tell you about Serving on Groups. Serving on Groups was developed in response to an identified need. Wisconsin Facets found that it wasn't just enough just to invite parents to join decision-making groups, but that they may need empowerment and information and support in order to be really effective participants. And so this resource provides that for parents, we think. But the information is intended to really support anybody who serves on decision-making groups, not just parents. And it applies to all kinds of decision-making groups, not just related to education and not just in Wisconsin, but really can be applied nationally. Wisconsin Facets developed the Serving on Groups guidebook with funding from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction and also the U.S. Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs, just to give them a shout out for helping fund this. You'll hear me refer to the resource as the guidebook for short as I go along. The research and review of this guidebook was the result of the work of a large group of stakeholders from across Wisconsin that included parents and educators and state agencies and a bunch of other people. I mean, in the first pages of the guidebook, there's like a huge list of everybody that really had input into this guidebook. There's something for everybody in the guidebook. It's a great introduction for some. It's a welcome refresher for others, and it's a good resource for everybody, including, people that are experts in groups and mentors, so that everybody can come to the table ready to serve. The guidebook and many related resources can be downloaded free from the Serving on Groups website, and the link is on the screen. I just want to give a big promotion of the online learning platform for the Serving on Group modules that's on this site. And if you just click modules at the top of the webpage, you can access the modules really 24/7. And Wisconsin Facets, I think last year, or maybe just this year, just updated this whole section, and it's really excellent. So be sure to check it out. And you can also order hard copies of the guidebook from that site. So first we're going to look at section 4, which focuses on the tools that decision-making groups use to make their meetings productive and effective. And here's a list of all of the tools that groups use that we're going to cover today. And we're going to look at each one of these really in more detail. So the first tool that can be used is a meeting facilitator or a chairperson or a leader, somebody that keeps the discussion going and makes sure that everybody really has the opportunity to share their ideas and thoughts through, during the meeting. To facilitate a meeting, there's some common strategies that good facilitators have. They make everybody feel comfortable and valued. They encourage participation by all members. They prevent or manage conflict when they arise, if it arises, between members of the group. They actively listen and observe others in the group to make sure that everybody's participating. Watch for body language, and if somebody starts crossing their arms and sitting back from the table, there's something going on there. So it's having a leader that's really observing body language and all of that to see and make sure that everybody gets a chance to participate. The leader to facilitate the meeting, they also ensure that quality decisions are being made by everybody in the group so that they're looking carefully at the information that's available and then making sound decisions. So, making sure that everybody has the opportunity to really do that. Finally, they make sure that the meetings stay on track and that the group is getting done what it needs to be done. So they're not going to be getting way off the agenda and into the weeds, but rather are making sure that the major points get addressed in the meeting. Another tool that is used by groups is ground rules. And these are used to create really an atmosphere where thoughts and perspectives can be openly shared. So other terms for ground rules that you may have heard could include working norms. It could be group guidelines. It could be group norms, and things like that. It's helpful if the whole group agrees on what the ground rules are going to be, and then reviews and possibly even posts them at the start of each meeting. Groups that I've served on, I've had the facilitators, review the ground rules. Sometimes they have a flip chart with the ground rules. I've seen it on Zoom meetings where they actually, have a handout that they show that has the ground rules that they review at the start. Sometimes the rules are if you have a paper agenda, sometimes the rules are on the back of the agenda or just included in the packet of meeting materials, just where members can easily see and refer back to them. So some examples of ground rules are speaking openly and honestly, asking questions. Sometimes families and others that are new to the group need permission to be, and also to be, a ground rule could be additive and not repetitive. So you could talk when there's new information to the discussion and not just repeat the same point multiple times. To listen carefully and respectfully to each other, like no sidebar conversations. Another ground rule could be to keep your comments brief and stay focused on task. Another ground rule could be turn your cell phones to silent or raise your hand when you want to talk or start and end on time. All shared information is confidential. That last one is a really important point because sometimes you're in a group where there certainly is information that is given out that should be remaining confidential, and that oftentimes should be one of the ground rules. So sometimes meetings are very formal and follow rules and procedures like Robert's Rules of Order. We discussed that in section 3 2 weeks ago. Other meetings are very informal and they could feel more like a conversation, but it's important for everybody in the group to agree on how the meeting's going to run. So when the group is developing the ground rules to guide how it will operate, be sure to contribute your ideas. And that's why I give you a list. And if you look in the guidebook, the list of possible ground rules to include is in there, so that you can potentially share those ground rules. Okay, so I'm going to throw out another poll to you, and if you could just take time to think about some ground rules that might be important to you. So here's a quick poll, and you can just check what ones you think would be important. And maybe, if you want in the chat box, you could write down any other ground rule that I don't have listed there, and, something that you found to be really helpful. I can read that out if you want. Okay, I think almost everybody voted here. So I'm going to close this and share it out with you. Okay, so 100% of you said start and end on time. Boy, that's really, I agree, that's probably one of the best ones. And then another group of, a large group of you said listen respectively to sidebars. It looks like everybody's used some of them. So, okay, that's good. I'll just hide that then. All right, so let's go to the next tool. Let's see if I can get down here to change it. Okay, so the next tool that groups use or should use is an agenda. An agenda is really a roadmap for the meeting. Agendas can be formal or informal, but the agenda should really only include items that are going to be discussed at the meeting. And the agenda is usually created by the group's leader or an executive or steering committee. Many groups ask their members if they would like to add anything to the agenda before the meeting, and this is a good way to put your topics or issues in front of the group. A lot of times, in my experience for IEP meetings, the school would send out a draft agenda for what they wanted to accomplish, like at an IEP team meeting, and then let parents and others have, school folks that are going to be on the team add things that they'd like to make sure that are on the agenda. So this is just really a good way to put your topics and issues in front of the group. Agendas are most useful if they're prepared in advance, preferably at least a few days or longer before the meeting happens, and that they're shared ahead of time, as I said. And obviously, they are most useful if they're followed during the meeting. So there's no point in having an agenda if the group isn't going to follow it or, to keep on track. And as I said before, the meeting facilitator really is responsible for making sure everybody follows the agenda and does the following things. So one, during the opening of the meeting, the facilitator welcomes everybody and allows time for introductions. And the facilitator is responsible for, setting the tone and the pace of the meeting. The middle part of the agenda is where pretty much the discussion and any decisions occur. And the facilitator here is responsible for keeping the group on task, just kind of assessing the group's interest level, seeking clarification of discussions and materials. The facilitator would also provide feedback to the group and enforce the ground rules during this middle time of the agenda. And then finally, at the conclusion of the meeting, that's usually a wrap-up time where the group is going to or should identify next steps so that everybody knows maybe what the agenda items for the next meeting are going to be, deciding on the next meeting date and time and location. And this could also be the time to evaluate the meeting that just took place. I've been on boards where they always give us a board evaluation for that meeting to see, and it's good because it's like an opportunity for a confidential input. So usually just the leader or the executive committee sees those comments and, hopefully incorporates, if people aren't happy or something, or really happy with something, that they take that under consideration for the next meeting. And the guidebook includes some good sample agendas. If you look on page 26 to 28 in your section 4 handout, you'll see some nice examples. So the meeting minutes are another tool that groups use. And at each meeting, somebody is or should be responsible for taking the meeting minutes or some informal notes. And meeting minutes are just really a summary of what happened in the meeting, and they're a record of that meeting. And they record the decisions that were made by the group, usually who brought up a certain idea and who made a specific motion for the group to vote on, who seconded the motion, what the vote was, like, the number of yeses, yays, and nays, and abstentions, and what that was on the motion. Minutes are also, they record what actions need to be followed up on. One of your roles in a group would be to make sure that the meeting minutes from the last meeting are accurate. So between meetings, somebody's responsible for typing up the minutes, the notes from the meeting, and distributing it to the members of the group for their review. And usually minutes are sent out before the next meeting. So, if you get those minutes ahead of time, make sure that you take time to read through them and recall, oh yes, is this what happened? Yes, this is right. And then if you find any errors at the beginning of each meeting, usually everybody will take a look at the minutes from the previous meeting minutes, and corrections or additions can be made, and then the minutes are approved or voted on by the group. So it's very important that you're confident that the minutes accurately reflect what happens at the meeting, because your name is going to be on, or you're voting on it, and you want to make sure that it's accurate. So groups that receive any type of government funding, like schools or county boards, should make sure that their meeting minutes are made available also to the public in some way. I mean, nonprofits like Wisconsin Facets are also accountable to the public, so they have to make board meeting minutes available to the public. And generally, how Facets does it is keep a binder in, well, it used to be in the front reception area in the library, and anybody could come in and look at it if they wanted to. And finally, you should, I really think it's important that you still take your own notes of the meeting. If you're not the secretary for the group, still take your own notes. Sometimes when you review the meeting minutes, you might find that they were recorded differently than you remember, and you're going to have your own notes to refer to. So be sure and take notes. Who said what was the vote, things like that. When I was the secretary of the Autism Society of Board of Directors for a couple of years, and I had to take formal minutes because it's a nonprofit. And I must admit, I did a little bit of political playing around with the minutes because I could put in there what I wanted. And if, but I also found it critical to keep my own notes, which were a lot more detailed, like, what people said, what their opinions were. And that often came in pretty handy later. So just know that minutes can be doctored a little bit if you have a secretary that has a certain position on things, because how it's worded, so if you're taking your own notes, you can kind of match it up. But I think notes are super important. In your guidebook on page 4, section 4 of your handout, on page 30, it has an example of minutes, so you can take a look at that. Plus, there's a lot of really good examples online too. All right, let me see if I can move that. Okay, so the next important tool that groups use is time management. And if you're in a meeting that's running overtime, you might want to suggest that a few agenda items be continued at the next meeting. And if you're in meetings for a group and they keep running overtime, you might ask the group leader or the group as a whole if the agenda is too full. Do more ground rules need to be established, or do you need some different ones than you already have? Do you need a timekeeper, somebody that isn't afraid to interrupt and remind the group how much time is left or when the group is off track? Does more time need to be scheduled for meetings? Like if a hour meeting is always going over, does the group have to plan to meet for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours instead, or maybe cut down the number of agenda items to be addressed at the meeting, maybe meet more frequently? I don't know, but you have to manage your time. If you say the meeting is going to be from 12 to 1, then that's when it should be. And otherwise, rethink how long the meeting should be. So sometimes the agenda might be written with the amount of time allotted for each item on the agenda. And if there's not enough time, then the group as a whole could decide to just drop the discussion and go to the next item. They might decide to move the item to the next meeting and continue discussion then, or they might redo the agenda to take time away from another agenda item that's coming up in order to finish up that item that's taking longer than you thought. So, one of my experiences, like in an IEP agenda, when it's sent to the IEP team before the meeting, sometimes, I've seen ones that didn't just list what you were going to talk about, but it had, the time for each section. And, if you get one like that, or one for any kind of meeting, be sure to look at the time that's allotted. In your head, think if that's enough time, and just make sure that if you don't think it's enough time, that you make sure to let somebody know. Um, okay, so another tool is written guidance, and written guidance helps members know how to interact with a group, or within a group, and all of the business that your group does. It does have to conform with your group's written guidance. So now written guidance could include some of the following, like bylaws. So bylaws are designed to really help a group function in an orderly manner, and they're kind of like the rules, or like an operating manual for your group. And so state law, like Wisconsin law, every state really has requirements for what bylaws for nonprofit organizations have to include. I mean, Wisconsin does. The state laws change from time to time. So if you're on the board of a nonprofit organization, it's a good idea to have your bylaws reviewed, particularly by an attorney from time to time, to make sure that your organization is still in compliance with the law, because you may have to, update your bylaws every so often. Policies are another form of written guidance, and they differ from rules or laws. And so while laws, like bylaws, can make you do something or stop you from doing something, a policy is more like guidance. So a policy typically guides the actions towards actions that are most likely to achieve a desired outcome. So some groups have a policy that their meetings will be guided by Robert's Rules of Order, for example. If you don't want to do that, then you don't have that policy. Or sometimes the bylaws say you have to do certain things, and then policy kind of gives you guidance on how to do that. And then there's policies and, where are we? Okay, procedures and protocols, and these are detailed step-by-step instructions for how to complete a certain task. So while bylaws and policies describe the requirements and sort of general operating of the group, a procedure describes in detail how a bylaw or a policy is translated into action, and these are things that guide the group's action. So bylaws, policies, and procedures contribute to overall efficiency and effectiveness of your group by providing clearly written operating standards or guidelines, and they're usually developed by those who oversee carrying out those decisions. So finally, another type of written guidance is compacts, and compacts are like agreements, and groups can find it helpful to write a compact or a statement like of the group's common purpose, goals, and actions that they're going to commit to. And so by writing the information down and having everybody sign the agreement or the compact, it becomes very clear how the group will all share responsibility and work together going forward. So reviewing the compact from time to time will help keep the group focused, on the mission of the group, and also helps them see what they've accomplished together. So the main thing is if you're in a group, check and see if bylaws are required, and then what other written guidance is guiding your group, and then make sure people are sticking to it. And sometimes those written guidance things, they get out of date, and you've got to make sure that the group takes a look at those every so often. I want to mention one of the handouts that you have is called Getting to Know Your Organization. And it's like a scavenger hunt. And if you're on a group now, which I think none of you were, you all have been on a group previously. But it's great to know the information about your group. And usually you can find you want to know what your website says about the group. So this scavenger hunt activity is one that I really suggest that you do either individually or if you're on a group with your group as a whole. So you find the group's website, you see if you can find the answers to all 13 questions, and when you're done, ask yourself and discuss it with your group if you found everything that's on the list and what was the hardest to find, and could you find out who you should call or contact to get the answers to your unanswered questions, or just more information about the group. And then, if things are missing or hard to find, talk with your group about making it easier for people outside of your group to learn more about your group, either on the website or like a Facebook page or something like that. And when members join a group, or if you're considering joining a group, joining a group, the person isn't always familiar with everything about the group. So this tool is really a good one to use to get at least a baseline of information about the group and how the group operates. And if you're not currently in a group, or if you're interested in what other groups have on their website, a good example of a decision-making group that provides a lot of information on their website is the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction's page of information about the Wisconsin Council on Special Education. I really like the information, the way they, put it out here. And here's the link to it too. You can use this page to answer the scavenger hunt questions for this group if you're not on one right now. The website tells you a lot about the purpose of the group, how often the meetings are, minutes from what's been accomplished by the group before, and it includes information about how you can become a member. For this one, you have to be nominated either by yourself or somebody else, like a parent, or like a parent organization. I might add, this is a great decision-making group to be on if you're a stakeholder in special education in Wisconsin. So, please consider applying to become a member to represent the perspective of parents, educators, or others. For those of you on this webinar from other states, and I know there are a couple of you, the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, requires that every state have a council on special education. So just know that there is one of these in your state. It might not be called the same thing, but that you could apply to for membership. So it's really a cool group to be on. The last tool is open versus closed meetings, and some groups are required to conduct their meetings openly. There are times, though, when a group might need to discuss issues privately. So open meetings are open to anybody who wants to attend. The public is invited to listen to the group's discussion. The public may also be given an opportunity to share their views on topics during, and they usually call it public participation time on the agenda, or public comment, or citizen forum, or citizen input, something like that. You might see that opportunity for public input, like at a town hall or a school board meetings, or we usually have it for Wisconsin Facets, for the board had an opportunity for input. So open meetings really build trust and credibility in your work as a group. It's a good way to connect with people outside of your group or organization to get their ideas and input. Closed sessions, on the other hand, those can be used by a group when it's not appropriate for the public or non-group members to listen to the discussion on an agenda item. So closed sessions are sometimes called executive session, and there's certain topics that groups need to deal with just in a closed session, like personnel issues, for example, or when confidential information about a student or something like that is to be considered. Anytime there's closed sessions, the meeting minutes should not detail what happened in the closed session. So instead, the meeting minutes should just say something like, the group went into closed session at 3:30 p.m. to discuss confidential information, and then went back into open session at 5 p.m. So we've just reviewed the six tools that groups use to be productive. And I just want to touch on, there's many reasons why meetings are unproductive, and some common reasons for unproductive meetings can be directly tied back to not using some of the tools that we just discussed. So participants aren't prepared for the meetings. They haven't received their their materials ahead of time, or they haven't read them before the meeting. Maybe there was no agenda, or people didn't get it or didn't read it before the meeting. The group didn't follow the agenda. Not everybody felt like their voice was being heard. There's not enough data provided to help people make good decisions, or the data isn't being used to make decisions. And then if there's no action items highlighted during the meeting, it's a sign that there probably hasn't been any work going on in between meetings, or maybe no progress is being made by the group. Maybe there's no timelines or deadlines that were set for things that the group had to work on since the last meeting. Or maybe there hasn't been follow-up since the last meeting, and people haven't connected or communicated for weeks or months in between meetings, and no progress has been made. An MCI network study way back in '98 showed that most professionals that go to meetings on a regular basis admit to, like 91% admitted to daydreaming, and 90% admitted to missing meetings or missing parts of meetings. A large percentage, 73%, said they brought back other work, or they brought other work to the meeting, and 39% say that they dozed meetings, or I mean, all of those things are things that are really going to make it an unproductive meeting when people aren't all connected. I just want to do another quick poll. Share this one out to you. And this is just, have you experienced any of these reasons for unproductive meetings? No meeting materials in advance, group didn't follow the agenda, not enough data, no timelines, and not everybody felt heard. Okay. All right. Most everybody voted. Just wait a minute here. Okay. All right. I'm going to share it out for you. All right. Okay, so 100% said they didn't have enough data to make informed decisions. That is really important. And then not everybody felt heard. I think all of those are really good. So some of you have experienced all of those, and just some more than others. I also wanted to mention, sorry about this, but I missed it before. I think this was when we were talking about things that could be done uh, Sarah commented that reviewing notes if you were absent is really important. So that's true. If you miss a meeting, make sure that you're reading the notes from the last meeting, so that you know what happened. Okay, so I thought it would be interesting to see if there's any research done, on the ramifications of spending hours a day on video conferences, like with Zoom, and how this might lead to unproductive meetings. So, so many people had to work and participate in meetings due to the COVID pandemic, and since the pandemic, many people have continued to sometimes work from home or participate from meetings from home. And researchers from Stanford University found something that one of the consequences of all this video conferencing was called Zoom fatigue. And the research found that there's 4 things that especially contribute to Zoom fatigue. And I'm going to just quickly review these 4 things. And I'm also going to share, what adjustments were suggested by the research to make, for people to make in order to avoid Zoom fatigues. And these are things that you don't even think about, realize that's happening. And, when you think about it, it does. So the first one was excessive amount of eye contact. So the Stanford research found that the amount of eye contact on video chats and the size of the faces on the screens is unnatural because they're all shrunk, small. Now, when we're in person, we can look at the speaker, we can take notes, we can look elsewhere. But on Zoom, everybody looks at everybody constantly, and the dramatic increase in eye contact, even when people aren't speaking, is can be really stressful. So you're constantly looking at people, so you're kind of in a hyper aroused state. And the solution that this study suggests is to take Zoom out of the full screen mode and reduce the Zoom window size. So you decrease the intensity of the meeting, and you're less inclined to look at other people through the meeting, during the meeting. I thought that was cool. Constantly looking at yourself. So studies shows that when people look at their own reflection, you're more critical of yourself. So on Zoom, if you have your picture up there, your video, you're staring at yourself and you're being critical for hours every day, which can be stressful. And the solution suggests that you use the hide self-view mode now and then, which you can do by right-clicking on your own picture. Okay, so the third one is mobility is drastically reduced. When you're on a Zoom conference, obviously you have to stay seated, or you do. When you're in person or just on a phone call, you have the freedom and flexibility to be mobile. I mean, you can stand up, you can walk around, move around a lot. And the study suggests that our cognitive performance improves with mobility. So here's the recommendation. When you're on a Zoom conference, turn off your camera periodically and even consider where your camera is positioned, and maybe use an external keyboard so that you have some distance and flexibility to move around more during the conference, or during the group meeting. So the last one is the cognitive load is heavier during video meetings. And when you're in person, you can watch for nonverbal clues, and communication is natural, and you just interpret kind of subconsciously. But on Zoom, you have to work much harder and put more thought into sending and receiving those normal communication signals, which can be exhausting. The solution suggested is to take audio only breaks. So turn your body away from the screen and just take a break from trying to watch for the nonverbal cues. I thought that was cool. I mean, it's just interesting. We're stuck with that Zoom for a while now. So here's some resources related to tools that groups use. The How to Write Minutes one I think is great. How to write a good board report. How to facilitate your first meeting. And some of these are videos, so the videos are I think super helpful. And then I have one more list. So if you have your handouts, you'll have copies of all of these. And I put on here the Wisconsin Open Meetings laws that are in Wisconsin and a summary of them. But just remember that it would be important, if you're in a different state, to check out the open meeting laws in your own state if you're not in Wisconsin. So now we're going to go on to section 5, and this is tips and strategies for groups. And again, a reminder that you have the section 5 handout from the guidebook. That's one of your handouts. Effective groups use a variety of strategies to promote positive group dynamics and communication to help the group work better. So some of these strategies might be new to you, and some you'll already know about. And we're going to cover what makes effective meetings. Well, you can see the list there. Okay, so then I'm going to flip over here to the next slide. So here's some tips for effective meetings. First, for the entire group to be prepared. As we just talked about in the last section, having an agenda prepared ahead of time is helpful. Sending the agenda and any meeting materials to group members before the meeting. Making sure that everybody's present and focused at the meeting and ready to work. And this means reading your materials ahead of time, reviewing the agenda, calling the meeting leader before the meeting if you need clarification, or calling another board member. I just, when I was on the Autism Society of America board, I always read my materials in advance. I mean, we got this huge packet a couple weeks before our meeting. We had to fly out to DC for the meeting, so I always felt like, it's really important that I'm prepared for this. I put yellow highlighter and tab stuff and, kind of crazy organization, but I read my stuff. And some people literally came to the meeting with their packet of materials still unopened in the envelope. Not good. So always make sure that you're reading your stuff and preparing and thinking about what's going to go on at your group meeting ahead of time. Another tip for an effective meeting, obviously, we talked about, was start and end the meeting on time. So you're being very respectful of everybody's time. And people can become frustrated when a meeting goes longer than's planned. And it's not fair to people that are there right on time. So, be on time and start on time and end on time. And try to move through the agenda in an efficient manner. And if time management is a continuing issue, try to include times, as I suggested earlier, along with the agenda items as a clue to keeping on track, or consider having a timekeeper. And then have the information that you need to make decisions. Share the information and the data with the group before the meeting as much as possible so that people can review it in their own way. Some people like to do additional research online. For example, if you have to make decisions on a budget, make sure that you've got all of the information on the costs and the resources and last year's expenses, actual expenses, so that, members can review the information in advance so that they're informed, they can have a meaningful discussion, ask questions, and then have a well-informed vote. Make sure you're not missing somebody who's critical to the discussion. So you always want to ask yourself, are the people present who are needed to make decisions. Who's missing? That's what you have to ask. If that person's missing, see if they can participate in another way, like by Zoom or conference call or Skype or FaceTime or something. Then follow the meeting agenda, like we talked about. And then finally, make sure that everybody's on the same page. So you want to make sure that you show consideration for all the members of the group by making an effort to clarify and summarize decisions. If you're looking around the group and you think there might be somebody who looks like they didn't understand what's being discussed, if the group's looking at a certain page in the handouts or and maybe you see somebody looking at something different, you can ask questions yourself or clarify how you understand the situation or how the information is presented. That way, you're not calling them out. You're not spotting them out for maybe not understanding or for being lost or confused or for not paying attention. You're being really perceptive and helping them not to be in an awkward position of just going along. If they're reluctant to ask questions and admit they are lost or they don't understand, that can be embarrassing for the person, and it is better to offer help and make sure that everybody in the group will be able to, make good decisions. Other, other strategies that for improving your group can include internal strategies, which focus on how to make the group itself function more effectively. And these can include providing time for members to get to know each other. And the group can set aside time. It could be just 5 minutes at the start of a meeting to share experiences. You can use icebreakers, like playing games that are pre-designed activities. There's a lot of books available that have really good ideas for icebreakers that could be short or that could last a little longer, maybe when the group is first coming together. The group facilitator can also be useful to get the group going and feeling comfortable with each other. Allowing time for cultural connections, having people have the opportunity to share about their culture in an open way, giving people a chance to ask questions as a way to have the group start to understand and get to know each other better. Providing orientation for new members. This orientation can be done by the group leader. It could be done by a few group members with just the new members before the first meeting that the new members are going to be attending. That's usually what Wisconsin Facets has done. They'd have the board president and maybe another board member along with the executive director do an orientation for new board members. Orientation can also be used as a refresher for current members who might be, they might have been on the group for years. Maybe they haven't looked at the bylaws or policies or procedures for years, and they would benefit from hearing about committee structure and group operating rules and the way the group makes decisions again, and so maybe you did the orientation for the whole group. All of this orientation information would be helpful for everybody on the group, not just the new people. If it was done together, it also doesn't single anybody out, and it, again, helps build internal relationships, especially as new members are coming in. Providing ongoing training and mentorship. You can identify opportunities for people to grow either personally or professionally as members of your group. I recently did some professional development training for boards of directors for a couple of U.S. Department of Education funded parent training and information centers. I did one in Missouri, in Indiana, and in Montana, and the topics that I covered were things like board legal responsibilities, understanding financial statements, how to prepare a strategic plan. I did one on succession planning because one of the organizations was going to be changing leadership and more. And many of the board members were new, and the training really helped all of the board members, all of them, grow individually, and they kind of became more cohesive as a group. Veteran board members participated in all three of these ones that I did, so it was a good refresher for them, plus everybody was on the same page of information by the time I got done. Giving background information and history of the group. It's important to people, especially who haven't been there from the beginning, to know, how did the group get started? What have they been doing? What are, highlights that have happened from this group? And then also consider different ways for your group members to participate. That might allow for greater participation. Maybe an in-person meeting every time isn't the best way to engage all of your members. You might have members who have transportation difficulty, childcare challenges, switching to a video conference format or something like Zoom or a telephone conference for some meetings might allow for greater communication and access for more of your members. A quote that we like to keep in mind is from Helen Keller. Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. And this is a good quote to keep in mind when you're thinking about some of what's really needed for us to really be able to work together and to understand each other in a decision-making group. So let's look at some of the things that are needed to work more effectively with each other. So, okay. Let me see here. I'm losing my place. Two-way communication. Okay. All right. So, sorry about that. We just discussed internal strategies for improving group dynamics and things that focus on how to make the group itself function more effectively. Now we want to look at external strategies. So external strategies look at more about how to build effective practices with the individuals outside of the group who are going to be most affected by the decisions of the group. Two-way communication is really important. Two-way communication is the group as a whole, or else members of the group, having a conversation with people outside of the group and trying to get input about the group's work from people outside of the group. If you're trying to get input from people outside of your group, some of the ways you could do it is by sending out surveys, sending family surveys or school surveys, opening family centers in the community or school where families can come and feel comfortable expressing their ideas. Maybe scheduling small focus groups, holding town meetings or public listening sessions. One neat example is a school board that encourages having breakfast with the school board. Or the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disability encourages having breakfast with your legislature. I mean, these are legislator, not the whole legislature. These are examples where it's not one person with power or authority standing in front of the room talking to people, but rather sitting down and talking with people, getting to know them, getting to know what their issues are, maybe sharing a meal. When speaking to external groups, it's really important to make clear if you're representing the whole group or if you're just representing yourself as an individual person. Okay. All right, so talking about culture in your group also is really important. If you haven't done this, just, bear this in mind. Culture has a lot of different definitions. The definition closest to what we're going to use for this workshop is culture is a way of life by a group of people. And if you look at our culture wheel here on the slide, you can see all the various components of culture. Every one of us brings our own culture to a situation or a group. And the inner ring of this diagram shows things that are typically more of a permanent or unchanging part of who you are, like age, race, ethnicity. These are examples of things you are born with that you can't change. You can't change your age, for example, though sometimes I would like to be a different age than I am. Gender and sexuality are in the ring, but these are examples that are things that are often permanent, but that some people choose to change. I want to just launch out quickly. Let's see. I guess, okay. The outer, I was going to do go back and do a poll, but I think I'm going to skip it. So the outer ring on the diagram is more dynamic. These are changing state of who you are. These are things that you might expect to change during your life. So just think of how much your life has changed in the last 5 or 10 or 15 years, and then think about how you expect these things might be 5, 10, or 15 years in the future. A lot of these you would expect to change over time. All of the things on this wheel makes up who you are, who I am, who each parent is, who everybody is. Along with encouraging families and other group members to be engaged in your group, we also need to be aware of that. Every person is unique and is coming to the group with a different cultural background, which impacts how we make decisions. Oops, I can't get it down there. There. Okay. So culture is so much more than what's on the surface. This is a short video clip. I've got the link here. It's also going to be on the end in the resource page, and I'm not going to show it right now just because I'm short on time. So, but it discusses culture well. The Sometimes culture is represented as an iceberg, where the things we see just by looking at somebody on the surface is just like the tip of the iceberg, and then all the important things, the culture things, are underneath. And when you see this video, you're going to see just a different representation. It's culture is represented as a tree, and so you'll find that um, you know you just don't focus on the leaves and the things that you can tell are different, but think about the roots, the beliefs and the norms that make people act the way they do and think the way they do. So grouping people of a certain culture into a big group and then assigning the same surface level characteristics to everybody isn't being culturally responsive at all. So um, part of understanding culture is the frame of mind in which you look at teaching others about your culture and learning about theirs. And terms you might hear related to culture are cultural competency and cultural humility. And cultural competency started out by looking at how service providers worked with clients. And many of you have been in cultural competency courses in school, and as many people started to go through classes that tried to help them master other cultures. I mean, this approach really didn't work out all that well because it's impossible to master every other culture, and this really can lead to stereotypes. So thinking about cultural competency, I mean, it's important to learn about pieces of culture like mandates and laws and rules and policies and standards, but not to put people in a box and to stereotype them. This is where the term cultural humility comes in. And cultural humility is really a lifelong commitment that we make to self-evaluation and self-critique to create and improve relationships that are beneficial, honest, and not saying my culture is better or worse than yours. And part of cultural humility is thinking about, addressing power relations and working as partners with people of other cultures. You just have to make a lifelong commitment to be curious, to be willing to learn, and to be willing to share related to culture. I wanted to let you know that in your handouts, you have a handout that's called Cultural Competencies and Cultural Humility Activity. And this is really just a great activity to use with your group. And you can talk about your culture, what it means to us, how it shaped us, how we want others to see us and to interact with us as a member of our particular culture. This is a great way for groups to get to know each other and to really expand their understanding of the culture of the people that they sit on the group with. I'd love to have all of you reflect just for a minute on your own culture and cultural background. And then if you could answer question 1 on this sheet, which is, what is one hidden or little known talent that you have? So if you can answer by either typing in the chat box or typing in the question box, what's one hidden or little known talent that you have that's kind of related to your culture? So I'm watching the question box and the chat box if anybody wants to have input on that. Okay, I don't have any input, so I'll just go along. And I was going to say, how I would answer it is, I would say I'm an awesome Czechoslovakian dumpling maker, for sure. Okay, so here's a couple. I was taught how to write cursive at the age of 5, so I naturally only write in cursive now. Okay, that's one. All right, so we're going to go on, and understanding cultural norms should have the outcome of increasing the participation in groups of families and individuals from all diverse backgrounds. And here's some strategies to do that. Just keep learning about the unique cultural values and beliefs of all members of your group and the communities that the group is serving. So remember, there should be representation and consideration of all demographic groups that are within a community related to the group that you're serving in. You may have heard the saying that we have in the disability community, that's nothing about us without us. So if you're part of a group that's serving families of children and youth with a variety of disabilities and who have a variety of cultural backgrounds and they don't have a voice in your group, that's something that you really have to think about changing in your group. Take time to recognize and honor racial and ethnic variations. Provide trained interpreters. If that's needed for important groups to be represented in your group, have materials translated into languages necessary for people to meaningfully participate. Limit the use of jargon. For many of us working with special ed issues, we're going to be dealing with many acronyms in special ed related groups, and I'm sure this is true of other fields as well. It's important to make sure if you're using jargon that you are defining the jargon word and that you're making conscious decisions if you really need to use the jargon or if you could use language without jargon. You might also think about developing a shared vocabulary as a group and with the group. I mean, I've been on groups where they had a cheat sheet. I was on the National Institute of Health group that reviewed National Institute of Health grants and contracts, and it was, not necessarily always something that I was familiar with the vocabulary that was used in some of these grant applications. So we got a cheat sheet of vocabulary, which was really helpful and made you feel like, that you were more knowledgeable as a result. Encourage members to mentor each other as an ongoing process to build skills and confidence. That's awesome. I mean, sometimes when somebody comes in and is new to a group, if they get a mentor assigned to them, it's somebody that they can talk with at the meeting or between meetings and help support them. Use cultural liaisons to help inform the group and also help connect people in the community to the work of the group. Now I've got a couple of slides again. That I love these short videos. I mean, they're really worth taking the time to watch. So I'm hoping that you will take the time to watch those. And then here's some more Section 5 resources. I want to specifically point out Leading by Convening. That is a super great resource to help groups practice shared leadership and shared decision making. And this resource offers great tools for reaching out to everybody that's impacted by the decisions that we're making. This is on the Wisconsin Facets Leading by Convening website, which is shown there. There's 5 online modules for self-learning. And what I like about this resource is that Serving on Groups information is to help people who are part of a group or thinking of joining a decision-making group. And Leading by Convening has tools and ideas to help figure out who should be at the table and strategies to help them get there to begin with. So very cool. So I really love these. How should I participate video? Very cool. So where do we go from here? The next, well, first of all, we covered sections 1 through 5. And so if you want the recording or handouts for any of these webinars, you can email Lori Karcher at Wisconsin Facets, and her email is on the slide. Make sure you register for the next 2 webinars in the series. And I'm going to finish with a couple of polls. So if you will, bear with me. Here's a couple of polls. Here's one. Do you think do you think this information has been helpful? Excuse me. All right, I'm going to close that. And I'll share it out, and then, all right. Okay, then there's one more. Okay, and do you think this was high quality? And I'll share this out. I'm not going to share the answer for this one, though. I'll just keep that myself. So I also, before I go, I want to promote a four-part workshop series that just give you a heads up for this. Um, these fantastic workshops do a much deeper dive into the Serving on Groups guidebook and make this resource even more relevant to your advocacy journey or to your group participation journey. And this is a free series that's sponsored by Wisconsin Facets and WISPE, which is the Wisconsin Statewide Parent Educator Initiative. This is going to take place on 4 Wednesdays in a row, starting in February. So you have time to plan it. But four Wednesdays in a row from 6 to 8 p.m. and it's done by Zoom. So you'll be able to use all those great Zoom tips that I gave you. And you can contact Sherry Silla at CISA One to register. So if you want to register for that way ahead of time, otherwise block off the Wednesdays on your calendar in February, starting, February 8th. So will be really worth your while. And then I just want to thank everybody. Your feedback is super important to us, so please remember to complete the evaluation. And thanks so much for joining me today. I hope to see you for the next one on October 27th. Oh, that's my birthday, by the way, so join me so I can celebrate with you. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you all soon.